I'm Dr. Randy Bach, and I'm the president of the Newton Taxpayer Association. And today's episode may not have that much to do about Newton. I think it's going to a little bit. Newton has a vibrant Jewish community, and a lot of people who have very smart heads on their shoulders. Sometimes maybe needs to be readjusted here and there. We've had a little bit of fracas in the local area. There was a brick thrown into the window of the butchery store in Brookline, our neighbor. And there are, inevitably and invariably lots of inflamed passions going on because of things that are not happening in Newton, but would resonate here. So to that end, on the, slight aftermath of the June 13th initiation by Israel of bombing in Iran, we're going to be talking somewhat internationally, globally, and trying to refocus it as well to local issues and some of the strife and examples of damage that have occurred one way or another, to people and property and whatnot in Massachusetts and in the United States as a whole, and so forth. A lot of protests going on here and there. So that's kind of a diffuse introduction, but we're going to try to focus in on a few different things, laser focused, get our sights over the target, as it were, with these kind of bombings that are happening far afield, but which have some interest, I think, locally. So to that end, I have Dr. Steve Gerzov with us. He is a medical doctor like myself, but he's also a medical doctor unlike myself. He's a radiologist by history, and he's a deep dive into various aspects of national affairs and also as how they have pertained to Newton. He's been a guest on my show here 2 previous times. You're welcome to reference those. Hugely knowledgeable guy. And without further ado, or any ado at all, Dr. Gerzov, tell us what's been captivating you of late.
Well, what's captivating me of late is what captivated me back in 1973 when I volunteered and served in Israel as a lone doctor in the Yom Kippur War. Following that, I became a student, not a scholar, but a student of Islam, basically why they do what they do, to explain some of the international political stands that they have taken. When I speak not of the religion, but of its ideology, its political ideology. I want to be sure I'm not misconstrued as criticizing the religion in any way, but that its political ideology can be lethal for some Muslims themselves who don't subscribe to whoever happens to be in power at that time, or to unbelievers, as they call those who do not subscribe to their variety of Islam.
Yeah, no, it's a funny thing. I think it's apostasy. There used to be a commercial for the Roach Motel. They'll come in, but they'll never come out. Now, without making any impertinent analogies, I was listening to a video of Tommy Robinson. That's his actual pseudonym, and he's been jailed in the UK, and he's kind of an agitator, kind of an English nationalist, and very sensible guy in many ways. And he was interviewed probably about a decade ago by a Pakistani woman in the news. She was a newscaster and whatnot, and kind of upbraiding him that he gets criticized all the time because he's worth criticizing. And he said, well, I get criticized, but wait until you criticize Islam. You're Muslim and you're not criticizing Islam. Wait till that happens. Anyway, fast forward to the current day, and she, I guess, recently decided that she doesn't want to be a Muslim anymore, and she's getting death threats. Now, whether you decide to be, Lutheran or not a Lutheran, or leave one church for another, that doesn't usually get accompanied by death threats. It seems to be kind of a one-way affair, and it's, you say it has a political element to it. It's a solidarity element, and you're either one of us or you don't deserve to be at all. So I apologize for that little long-winded roundabout, but there is kind of a Velcro aspect where you're not allowed to leave. And the irony is, even in the Islamic Republic of Iran, there's very low adherence to Islam per se. The application of religion, is kind of like a grassroots thing. It has to come from the soil up rather than kind of be applied down. And so when people are forced to do almost anything, in this case in the Islamic Republic of Iran, you're supposed to do this. You have to wear the burqas, you have to wear hijab, and so forth. You have to be doing X, Y, and Z. You can't do this. All the kind of other behaviors you might see happening in England or even in, I guess, Turkey and whatnot to an extent, you are forbidden in Iran, and that has actually bred kind of a counter movement of the people themselves who are very much not in favor of the regime. So again, another diatribe, but I don't know how you feel about any of those things, whether tie into some of the topics you have.
Well, it's not my feeling, but the term for apostasy in Arabic is rida. In fact, the first caliph following Muhammad from 632 to 634, for those 2 years, had what was called the Rida Wars, because immediately after Muhammad died, a lot of the surrounding tribes left Islam, and so Abu Bakr, the first caliph after Muhammad, went out and killed them all. That basically set a precedent. If we could have the first slide, I have some quotes from a book I use that I found very helpful called, by Samuel P. Huntington, The Clash of Civilizations. He defined a new term in the late 1990s of fault line wars, where different civilizations collided. Specifically, he was looking at Islamic societies where they collided with non-Muslim societies. That could be Pakistan and India, or Israel and its neighbors. If you can read these, fault line conflicts between different civilizations, particularly prevalent between Muslims and non-Muslims. Cultural differences sharpen the conflict. Religion is the principal defining characteristic of civilizations. And these I took as quotes that explain a lot of what's going on between Iran and Israel. Israel hasn't done anything to Iran except exist. On page 256, wherever one looks along the perimeter of Islam, Muslims have problems living peaceably with their neighbors. On page 258, Islam's borders are bloody, and so are its innards. And again, Muslim states also have a high propensity to resort to violence in international crises. And when they did use violence, Muslim states used high-intensity violence. I think the next slide we can go right through because that pretty much complements this. But the third slide is a picture of the book itself. That was delivered in 1993 as an article in Foreign Affairs magazine. It created such a stir that he was asked to write the book about it. And this book, The Clash of Civilizations, if we could have that next slide, is where I take this from. Using that, I went on to many other books to read about Islam to further my understanding of it. And there's the book itself. I can't say it's a fast read. It might not be a great read for a lot of people, but it does explain a lot of why Islam, specifically as a theocracy, is doing what it does. In a theocracy, you have a sin against the religion. That becomes a political or a communal crime, and that's investigated by the police and punished by the judiciary. So in Iran, if you're not wearing your hijab correctly, whatever, you can actually be arrested, and in Asaf Hamini, I think is her name, was actually killed, as many other women have been for trying just to exercise their right not to wear their hair covered.
Well, it's not a right. It's their desire in this case.
You're right.
Yeah, it's kind of an intersection. The funny thing is, there's so much focus on Israel, Iran, but, people neglect kind of the march of Islam in other places. I remember, pretty much where you see crises these days, in the Philippines, for instance, Mindanao is the southernmost island. For decades or more, they had these bloody, civil wars, and it was basically the Islamic Front, the Moro, M-O-R-O group, or whatever. All throughout, North Africa, it's, there's Islamic groups. There's Polisario, which is kind of an Algerian group, but there's all kinds of Al-Qaeda of the Maghreb and this and that. People don't really have those register whatnot. In Nigeria right now, there are hundreds of people getting kind of Hamassacred, if that's a verb, on a weekly basis. Just the other day, there was like, I don't know, 150 people just kind of swooped upon in their village and beheaded. It's a very, it's not a nice way of asking. It's not kind of a, and people kind of don't really have that register on their radar because it's not this one conflict. All the universities here, they have the, they actually don't even have the Hamas flag. They're waving this kind of black, green, white and red affair, which is like the PLO flag. But the Hamas flag itself is kind of the green version of the standard, call to war that ISIS used and so forth. But anyway, there just seems to be kind of a focus on certain one aspect with one people who want to exist. There's been Darfur, there's wars, the South Sudan versus North. There's all kinds of conflicts all around the world in Assam province and in like east of Bangladesh and Burma, and all these places all around the globe. And a fair number of them have to do this with this kind of religious flavor and religious fervor.
It's more than a fair number. In that book, Samuel Huntington shows that a high percentage of all of those are religious disputes, basically fault line wars. In Nigeria, many of our listeners may have heard of Boko Haram. That means books are forbidden. That is a Nigerian variety of Islamists in the north with predation on the tribesmen and farmers of the south. The beheading is part of a variety of culture within the foundational texts of Islam, because many Muslims consider Muhammad the Insan al-Kamil in Arabic, the perfect man. And in their tradition, he decapitated enemies. So to be like him, decapitation is common, like we saw with Daniel Pearl. But to shift back, when Dr. Bach first asked me to be on the program the other day, he talked about my talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis because of the nuclear issues in Iran. I said, nuclear missile, that was different. That was a mutually assured destruction. We had the term MAD, mutually assured destruction. We knew that Russia would not attack us because we would attack them back. And mutually assured destruction basically secured us both. We don't have that with Iran because in the Shia Islamic eschatology, that's their theology of the end of times, there will be a huge conflagration, like a nuclear war. Supposedly, there is this conflagration will take place in Dabik, a town in north of Syria. That's the name of the ISIS booklet that they put out. Here, at that time of Allah's choosing, there will be this huge conflagration. Jesus will return, break the cross, in other words, end Christianity, and that's where the hadith the hadith that says, even the stones and trees will cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him." That's from a different segment of the foundational texts of Islam. But this is the belief system that they in Iran have. Certainly not all Iranians, certainly not all Muslims, but that's the effective functioning belief that is driving Iran foreign policy towards Israel today, and why Israel had to destroy it, because they knew that never again would happen. But for them, never again is not just a statement, but it's actually their political policy.
Yeah. So I have a friend who's in the UK. He's a Irani expat named Putkin Azamer. He's been on my YouTube channel a number of times, and he has his own podcast and whatnot. But he likes to point out that the mullahs, the ayatollahs and whatnot, some of them might be from what is constitutionally, geographically Iran and whatnot, but they don't see themselves as Irani per se. Actually, they kind of rebel against that term. Like Khomeini, I think his theology training was in Lebanon, and they are of this sect that you've been talking about. It's kind of this 12er imam kind of thing. But this is a quote actually from Ayatollah Khomeini, who's not to be confused with Khamenei, who is now, but the original leader kind of their Lenin of this revolution, he said, "We do not worship Iran, we worship Allah. For patriotism is another name for paganism. I say, let this land, Iran, burn. I say, let this land go up in smoke, provided Islam emerges triumphant in the rest of the world." And that's quoted in Nest of Spies, America's Journey to Disaster in Iran by Amir Taheri, who himself is Persian. And he wrote the book of that name. And he interviewed or quoted Ayatollah Khomeini, the Ruhollah Khomeini. And they actually try to obliterate all aspects of being Persian. They're very colorful costumes that people throughout all these regions have. You look, I saw an interesting reel of the natural dress of, I don't know, you pick a country, of Lebanon, of the Caucasus countries, Dagestan and whatnot. These places in Iran. All those things are obliterated. Afghanistan and whatnot. Various tribal colors in Yemen and whatnot. Everything becomes black.
I agree. The concept of nationalism introduced to the Ottoman Empire at the end of World War I, where countries were being made. Egypt, as we know it, Algeria, Lebanon,
Tunisia, Libya,
these
Morocco,
various countries, they were
Algeria.
made up using a Western concept of nationalism. They had no national concept. In fact, in the British Mandate of Palestine, the Palestinians were actually the Jews. There was the Palestinian Post, the Palestinian monetary system, the Bank of Palestine. At UCLA, the Palestine Student Association were all Jewish. The other locals were simply known as the Arabs. And when 1948 and partition came about, naturally the state of Israel declared independence, but not independence from Britain, because it would have been independence for the Israeli portion and by partition the Arab portion. The problem is many of these students who are rioting now don't know because of books like this, The 100 Years' War in Palestine, where he says the provision for an Arab state in the 1947 partition resolution, parenthesis, albeit never implemented. He never says that Israel accepted independence. The Arab states did not accept it. Instead, they turned around, attacked Israel with 5 armies. They could have had a Palestinian state back then.
Well,
but they get miseducated about that.
That's a genuine and general problem. It's a conception problem, and how people conceive of things. I mean, there's so much violence has been happening. In Boulder, Colorado, there are a bunch of, I guess, elderly people commiserating with the people still in hostage situations, like almost 600 days after their abduction, and miserable conditions. I mean, the ones who've come out talk about just being, left kind of in the bowels of tunnels, or hidden away in closets and basements and whatnot. No light of day, etc. And and they were Molotov cocktailed. They were given
yes.
a Molotov cocktail, not to drink but to be burned with. There was there was that young couple outside of the one of the, I forget the name of the museum in Washington D.C.
Yeah.
Shot cold blood. We're in a culture and a society where things have gotten very rough and ready. When that healthcare executive, I think it was Brian Thompson or something like that from United Healthcare, whatever, Luigi Mangione was celebrated for killing him. Now we have this guy in Minnesota, who's shooting politicians. People have gotten very rash and quick to judge, and I don't think they have due consideration. A lot of these things are going to play out one way or another. Obviously we have our kind of favorites and desired winners and whatnot, but the dialogue oftentimes is missing because there's not a basic foundational knowledge of the facts underlying.
Well, if we could go to that next slide, one of the basic foundational points I'd like to get across is a bigger view of the Middle East. I think the next slide will show Israel in context, not just to Gaza, which it seems to dwarf, but as you can see up there, or maybe you can't, but Israel is this little red dot surrounded by these other Muslim countries, which dwarf it by 410 to 1. If there was interest in really saving the Palestinians, such as they're now called, there's plenty of room in these countries for them. They just would prefer to be without Israel. But there's an interesting thing that occurred to me yesterday, and that was when I was thinking about a mystery called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime.
It's actually The Silver Blaze is the story. It's
Silver
Sherlock
Blaze
Holmes.
was the original by Sherlock Holmes, where they mention that a dog did not bark in the night. It's what didn't happen. Why? Because the stranger who committed the crime was actually the dog owner. He wasn't the stranger.
Right.
But the witness didn't know that. So what is the curious? What did not happen at night? What didn't happen at night didn't happen at the UN. In every other war that Israel has been involved in, within days as Israel started winning, the UN was calling for a ceasefire. Peace, ceasefire, ceasefire, stop the army, whatever. All of a sudden, no one in the UN is calling for a ceasefire because no one wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon, because they, as a Shia theocracy, threaten all of the Sunni states, not just Christian Europe or Hindu India, particularly Hindu India, because the most important thing about Islam is one, Tawheed. There is only one God. They hate Christians because Christians have a threesome, so to speak, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Muslims have many gods. I'm sorry, the Hindus have many gods. Hanuman, the monkey god of health, the Vishnu, the preserver and restorer, for example, and so are considered mushrik. Mu means one who. Shrik is one who associates others with God, and that's one of the worst unforgivable crimes under Islam, for a Muslim to do that. Obviously, they're unbelievers, and when Islam moved into and captured India, starting around the year 1000, it's estimated that 50 million Hindus were slaughtered as Islam progressed. And the basic belief system of Islam has not changed. In Islam, there's a concept of bidah, which is innovation. Nothing should be changed. They insist that the Quran itself has not changed since its inception or handing down in the 7th century. We might look at that as an ethnographic sampling of that part of the world in the 7th century. Most people don't do that because if you did, as one teacher did at Gerzov University, he got thrown out of the second-story window by his students.
So Gerzov is
in the West Bank.
It's run by an Arab.
Yes, that is a very radical.
It kind of sounds Hebrew, but it's not.
Yes, in the West Bank, Samaria, when they have rushing period, it's not for fraternities, it's which terror organization the student is going to join. And depending who is stronger in that area, the student better join the right one or he gets beaten up.
Right. So I was thinking recently, I watched clips of Douglas Murray, and he was talking about Cyprus. And I'm springing this on you, and I apologize. But in 1973, 74, I mean, Cyprus is historically a Greek island, and the language is Greek, and I guess like 90% of the population was Greek at the time, whatever. And so the Greek nationalists kind of took over through election or whatever. I forget how they came in, but the Turks felt threatened. So there's a Turkish minority, about 10% at the time, and so the Turkish Navy, etc., came in and invaded the island.
In other words, the country of Turkey invaded this island to protect its Turkish-speaking
It's an independent country. It's Greek-ish.
Yes.
But the point is, speaking about the dog that didn't bark in the night. I'm just bringing that up.
Let's just go back a second. That's not too different than Hitler's Germany invading the Sudetenland to protect its German people.
Right, fair enough. But as far as the dog that didn't bark in the night, people don't talk about Cyprus. Cyprus was partitioned. The Turks originally came in 74, and they took 3% of the island. The north part, which is actually the Greek part, and the Turkish Cypriots, they were living diffusely through the island, whatever. And so, it's kind of like the 1948 India-Pakistan separation. So people kind of voted with their feet, and they formed this Turkish enclave in the north. Became this thing that no other country recognized. The Turkish, I forget, they've got an acronym, the NC, the Northern Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus,
yeah.
TRNC or something like that. And then they wound up taking 36% of the island, even though the Turkish fraction was only like 10% or something like that. And that they've been bringing people in, and they pushed all the Greeks out, and they've got all the kind of Greek buildings, whatever, emptied out. And then they've been bringing people from the Turkish mainland into Cyprus. And I don't bring this up because nobody talks about this. Like, here is an actual division, and it's a religious division, and there was a war about it, and the Greeks weren't happy about it, and they've kind of had this Cold War with Turkey for a long time, but they're both part of NATO, so it's kind of like, anyway, my point is there are loads and loads of conflicts like that out in the world, and yet the world seems only to focus on the one involving that tiny little country you mentioned. And that's kind of an irony. No pun intended on Iran, but kind of an irony. So anyway, I'm going to give you the last couple minutes to close up. And what kind of advice do you have for our viewers and listeners who are in Newton, who might feel somewhat conflicted one way or another about kind of always being in front? I mean, in Fiddler on the Roof, they said the Jews, the chosen people, but Tevye said, God, for once, why don't you choose somebody else? So, Israel's conflict is kind of the dog that never stops barking for other people.
The only advice I would give is to suggest what I did. I read widely when I started getting interested in Islam as a religious ideology. I read dozens, literally dozens, multiple dozens of books, and really studied hard because I wanted to formulate my own opinion. What I've come up with is some of the things I've said this evening, and it's actually very scary, because what Muhammad did in the 7th century has not undergone any change. To try to change that is to get threatened with death. He created this ummah, the Muslim body politic, whatever. You're either in the ummah or not. He also divided the world into two: the Dar al-Islam, the place of Islam and the ummah, and the Dar al-Harb, the place of war. And the mission of Islam is to convert or kill the others so that Allah will only be worshipped by everyone on earth. This is taken to heart by the believers in Iran, unfortunately, to the detriment of their people.
No, it's a funny thing. I'm going to interrupt your last minute because I had an idea. The funny thing is Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is basically, not entirely, but it was slid in by Jimmy Carter. And I don't think it would have existed but for Jimmy Carter, who was extra tough on the Shah. And Shah wasn't a perfect guy, so forth. But that regime, people would probably give their left pinky to have back these days. They actually want the Shah back. And this kind of same thing happened in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood. And Jimmy Carter 2.0, Barack Obama, went with Morsi and whatnot and had the Muslim Brotherhood. When there were uprisings during Obama's reign, 2009 to the next following 8 years, there were uprisings in Egypt and in Iran. And in Iran, they had their own green revolution. Obama basically turned his back on that. And in Egypt, he went with the Muslim Brotherhood. And they managed to rectify that in Egypt. They don't have a perfect regime. General Sisi is not perfect, but he's an improvement, I think, over Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamic, republics elsewhere. So I think people have to kind of take these things into consideration and kind of look globally. So I want people to think about Cyprus, think about Egypt as a kind of take the attention off the one place that is kind of working for freedom, similar to what we have here.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood is a whole nother topic that we can't even start on now. But I want to thank you for bringing me on this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Gerzov.